Hello everyone and welcome to another really awesome game from round 10 of the 2022 Tata Steel Chess Masters. Today is a rest day, so we have some time to check out a couple of games that we haven't, and the game that we're starting is Fabiano Caruana versus Rapport, really an exciting one, especially since Rapport has the black pieces against Fabi, which is not easy for anyone. And yesterday we had that unfortunate event with Magnus and Karyakin that ended in the very a quick draw, but then we had a brilliant game that lasted 7 hours between Pragu and Vidit, and that really improved my day. Okay, let's get to this one, and then we're gonna discuss the standings a little bit more for those of you who might have missed yesterday's coverage. So here, Fabi with the white pieces opens with c4. He goes for the English opening. We have e6, knight to c3, so the Agincourt defense, and now knight to f6. We have e4, this is the most popular line nowadays, and now we have c5. So very interesting. We have e5 challenging the knight, and now knight back to g8. So it looks a little bit weird, you know, that you really shouldn't bring your pieces back to starting squares, but this is a variation, and of course both of them know this. So d4, we have c captures on d4, queen captures on d4, and now knight to c6, gaining a tempo on the queen. So queen to f4, and now d6, challenging this e5 pawn. So knight to f3, adding a defender to the e5 pawn, and the position has been reached before. And interestingly, Daniil Dubov had this position with white twice, and he both won both of his games, one against Pichot, one against Kovalev, and in one game knight to h6 was played, in the other game knight to e7 was played. Here Rapport continues with knight to h6, and now in both of those games that we've mentioned, bishop to d2 was played, but here we have e captures on d6 by Fabi, and it is now, as of move 9, that we have a completely new game. And the e captures on d6 is incredibly interesting because it's not in the engine's top choice, not even in the top 3. Bishop to d2, the move that the Dubov played, is. So very interesting if this is something that Fabi cooked up himself, or maybe he isn't familiar with this at all, and he's just finding moves over the board. You know, it's just very interesting. So here we have bishop captures on d6. Of course, as of move 9, we have a completely new game. I know some of you really enjoy knowing this fact. So bishop captures on d6, we win the pawn back, and now queen g5. Here Fabi offers a queen trade. Rapport agrees. You could just castle, and then maybe white captures, and we capture back with the rook. But here we have queen captures, knight captures, bishop captures, and now f5 by Rapport. A very interesting move. For one, taking away the e4 square from the white knight. Other than this, you are preparing some very nice kingside expansion. If white doesn't capture this, we're going to play knight f7, h6, g5, and we're already pushing. And it's kind of a dare to Fabi if he wants to capture the knight on h6. For example, captures, you ruin black's pawn structure here, but it's not all that easy. Black still has the bishop pair, and let's say something like g3, bishop d7, both players have to finish development, castles. White will also probably castle queenside, attack the bishop somewhere, let's say c5, and it's not clear. I'm pretty sure everyone in the top 20 in the world would pick the side with the bishop pair here, as it's just that there's a lot of play on both sides of the board. So instead of Fabi castles queenside, and now bishop to c5. Our bishop is attacked. Here we have knight to e5. Now with a nice little trick. Yes, the f2 pawn is hanging, but so are a lot of other things. For example, if you capture the knight, and no, it's not a free knight, there's rook d8 checking f7, and Rapport loses the rook. So Rapport plays knight to f7. This is what we were planning to play. We want to start our expansion here, and now knight captures on c6. So Fabi used this little trick to mess up Rapport's pawn structure here. So b captures on c6. Now black has 3 pawn islands, and now bishop back to e3. The bishop here is hanging, so we have to move it. Bishop to e3, and Rapport also captures, messing up Fabi's pawn structure. So now Fabi also with the 3 pawn islands. And now black of course has a light square bishop. You want to play e5, you want to free up that light square bishop, but there's no rush. It's not like white can stop e5. So here king to e7 first. We want to get a rook into the game, but either king to e7 and then e5 or e5 king e7 both is fine. Bishop e2, Fabi continues development, and now g5. So there's nothing Fabi can really do about this kingside expansion. Knight to a4. There's no b pawn or d pawn, so the c5 square will be great for the white knight. h5, Rapport continues advancing those pawns. Knight to c5, and now even h4. And here Fabi wants to do something about this expansion, so he starts with the g4. He wants to well, he would very much enjoy if black captured here, but of course Rapport will not do this. He plays knight to e5. Now he's just threatening to win a pawn here, and Fabi has to decide how to react. If you capture, then this is perfectly fine for black. Those pawns are just monsters. What Fabi should do is rook h to g1 and defend the pawn like this. But if you don't see what Rapport will play, then you play rook to d4, as it's a much more active move, but there's a problem with this move. So feel free to pause the video here and try to figure out what Fabi missed while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this, seemingly hidden idea. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is knight captures on g4. That's the good stuff. Yes, so congratulations to everyone who found this. The point is the rook on d4 is very vulnerable, and the move e5 will chase away the rook completely from the fourth rank. So the rook isn't really guarding the g4 square. And now there isn't a better move than bishop captures on g4 here. Fabi plays this now just e5. And now the rook has to move, and we're gonna pick up the bishop here. So rook to d2, and now we captured the bishop, and now, okay, we are up a pawn. It's a double g pawn, but still, you will be able to create a very nice passed pawn here. So knight to d3, going after the e5 pawn, and the problem with this is that, for example, if king e6, which seems like a move you want to play, then e4, and how are you getting your king into the game? All of the squares are taken. What's the light square bishop gonna do now? There are no squares that you can use to make the bishop useful. So this would be this would actually be okay for Fabi. So instead we have rook to h6, now offering not just the e5 pawn, but also maybe e5, g4, c6, all depending on what Fabi plays. So knight captures on e5 and rook to e6 now, attacking the knight and going after the pawn here, which seems like a bit of a counterintuitive move, because the rook on e6 prevents your bishop from guarding the g4 square, and now Fabi grabs another pawn with knight captures on g4 and guards the e3 pawn. So here Rapport plays rook to e4, attacks the knight, knight to f2 attacks the rook, and now not rook captures on e3. That's an isolated pawn, so we will probably be able to win it later on, but also maybe it's not even important for this game. Our plan is to play g4, g3, create a passed pawn, and win this way, and this is maybe a second weakness that we can use to sort of augment our first advantage. So here rook captures on c4 check. This is much better. Rook to c2, and here Rapport trades with captures, and bishop to e6 now, and we have this endgame now with completely equal material, but the 2 against 1 on the king side is definitely an advantage for Rapport. Also, he has a bishop against a knight with play on both sides of the board. That a2 pawn is already hanging, so black is definitely better here. How much? Well, that's on Fabi to try and prevent, and for Rapport to try and prove. So here rook to g1, trying to give up the a2 pawn for the g5 pawn, but just rook to f8. We challenge the knight here, so knight to d3, and now g4. We are starting the advancement of our pawn majority on the king side. Knight to f4 now, challenging the bishop, and also hoping that Rapport blunders. If bishop captures an a2, knight g6 check, picks up the rook, and now white is winning. So after knight f4, bishop to f5 with check, and now king to d2. We have rook to d8 with check, now comes king to e2, and now king to f6. And now the problem is Yes, the material is equal. That, of course, everyone can see, but there isn't a useful move for white here, so it's very hard to figure it out. If you could play something like rook to d1, challenge black's rook on the d file, then I guess it would be perfectly fine, but it's losing by 4. So rook captures, and now king e5. Your king is just much more active. Let's say b4, you really don't have any useful moves here. King e4, we're going to defend our e3 pawn, and now just g3. We create a pass pawn, captures. White without really a useful move. You are controlling all of the squares here. If white moves back, then we pick up the e3 pawn. There's just nothing you can do here. You can play a4. We're going to play bishop g4 check, king to d2, or you move at f1 and then give up the e3 pawn. So let's say you want to keep the pawn, but then you give up the f3 square, king f3, and that's it. Knight to d3, hoping for maybe something like this, and then we deliver check and give up the knight for a pawn. But even this you don't have to allow. You can just force white to run out of moves. It's a really fun position. For example, a5, bishop to f5, take away all the squares from the white king, so you're not allowing this, you're not allowing this. For let's say knight back to f4, we're gonna play a6, and white is out of moves. Whatever you play, either you move the knight and then this is winning, or you move the king, then we pick up the e3 pawn, and okay, maybe knight g2 check, we play king d3, we pick up all of the pawns here, and now it's easily winning. So rook to d1 would be nice, but it's losing by force. So b3 was played by Fabi. B3 or b4, a4, everything is possible. It's just not very useful. So here we have a5 by Rapport, king to e1, and now king e5. Black has a very clear way of increasing the activity and pushing for more advantage. Knight to g2 now, going after the pawn here, and just a rook h8 defending the pawn. And now knight to f4. Here king to f2 would have been a bit more resilient, but still it would be incredibly difficult to hold. After knight to f4, it's just much better for black, because here Rapport pushes g3. It seems like you've given up a pawn, but not really. If h captures on g3, we don't capture, we advance our pass pawn, and that's it. If king f2, we just play h2, rook to h1, and bishop e4. It's game over. Knight g2, okay, you've blocked this, but now rook f8 check, the king has to move, and you win the knight. So there's that. So here king g2 by Fabi, and now bishop to e4, attacking the rook here, rook to d2, and now h3 even. So those pawns are just impossible to stop. If h captures, h2 is winning. There's no stopping h1. So here Fabi plays a3. He plays something just to see what Rapport will play, and now g2. We'll have to wait a little bit. First, rook to d8. Rapport finishes the game in style because the rook cannot be captured. If you capture the rook, then g captures on h2, and you cannot prevent promotion. So here, rook to b2 by Fabi, but now just bishop to f3. And after this beautiful move, it was in this position on move 42 that Fabiano Caruana resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done. As you can see, black controls all of these squares, so whatever white does, rook to d1 will be checkmate. Or rather, not whatever white does, white could stop the checkmate, but then however you stop the checkmate, if you move the rook from the second rank, then this is just winning. And if you play rook d2, then black very happily trades, captures, g captures on h2, and now the h1 move will win the game. So really a very nice game by Rapport. Fabi made that one little mistake, and it's okay. It's, you might say, it's very unlike Fabi to make such a mistake, as he is a former member of the 2800 club. Not only that, he's the former World Chess Championship challenger, but this is chess, and in chess no one is safe. So here just rook d4, and that's it. Now it's all Rapport from here. He played incredibly well. He never gave Fabio a chance to reorganize himself, and that was, as you see, more than enough to win the game. With black pieces nonetheless against Fabiano Caruana. So for those of you who maybe missed it yesterday, these are the standings. So Magnus still leading the tournament with 7 out of 10, and with 7 out of 10, Magnus actually is winning 1 rating point so far. So we'll see if he finishes the tournament on a positive note. He's facing Vidit next. We also mentioned that it would be great for Vidit if he actually defeated Pragyananda, because then he would have a clear shot. If he takes down Magnus, he takes the lead in the tournament. Now it's not going to be as pleasant, but still, of course, you're playing Magnus, he will do his best. Then Anish in sole second with 6.5. Then Rapport climbs all the way to third, tying with Mamedjara with 6. 5.5 points by Yesipenko, Karyakin, and Vidit. With 5, we have Fabiano, Caruana, Jan Krzysztof Duda, and Jordan van Forest with 4.5. Sam Shanklin with 4. Daniil Dubov and Pragananda with 3.5. And Niels Grandelius in last place with 3 out of 10. So really, really exciting stuff. Very much enjoying the tournament. We'll see what happens. Will Magnus be able to win the tournament? And if he does, will he also win some rating points by winning the tournament? Because that's a bit of a problem for him, since he is so much higher rated than everyone else. Even if he wins first place in a tournament, he can still lose the rating points. So he has to not just win the tournament, he has to crush it in order to win rating points. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Thomas Earl, Trevor Furtado Souza, Nguyen Khan, William Rose, and Benjamin Davidson for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this spectacular event until it finishes. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.